Welcome to Streetwalker Geographic. Hope you enjoy. In today's Streetwalker Geographic, we have a young tweaker who has passed out due to the normal overly tweak and now has flies nesting over a hot pit. Just watch as the flies go back and forth, carrying food to their young. On the other hand, the tweaker will remain passed out for hours until the overly tweak wears off. Only then can she continue her tweaking day. On today's episode of Streetwalker Geographic, observe now, in the cracked concrete jungle, a solitary human specimen arranges his pots and pans with the reverence of an alpine chef. Notice the ritual, a clang to announce territory, a pause to reassess the universe, then, against all odds, a gourmet meal emerges. On today's episode of Streetwalker Geographic, here we see the North American ladder tweaker, balanced precariously above his natural enemy, gravity. The male approaches a beehive, mistaking it tragically for something that wants a plastic bag placed over it. His movements are slow, deliberate, and deeply incorrect. The bees, ancient guardians of the hive, sense the disturbance immediately. What follows is not an attack, but a correction. On today's episode of Streetwalker Geographic, we have found two tweakers in their natural habitat. Watch as the tweakers accept their fate in their fight against a new drug they call Tweacelin. I couldn't imagine the pain these tweakers may endure, but one could only hope the tweakers would make it through one day. On today's episode of Streetwalker Geographic, we watch within this modest enclosure as two specimens emerge. One remains seated, motionless, his mind clearly sprinting ahead of his body. The other roams freely, dancing with urgent conviction. At the end, he accelerates, spinning and pacing as if completing a sacred ceremony. On today's episode of Streetwalker Geographic, here we observe Homo tweacus urbanus, a rare but highly energetic subspecies thriving at the intersection of desperation and a red light. Notice the posture, shoulders hunched, movements sharp and unpredictable, classic signs of a creature permanently locked in fight or flight. He strikes the windshield with remarkable intensity, asserting dominance over the glass, while the driver remains frozen, eyes forward, hoping invisibility is still an option. Observe how he ignores social cues entirely. Horns, head shakes, and frantic hand waves only fuel his resolve. To him, resistance is merely encouragement. On today's episode of Streetwalker Geographic, upon the cool concrete, we observe two elusive nocturnal wanderers, finally at rest. The first specimen, note the remarkable flexibility, has assumed a defensive posture usually reserved for seasoned yogis or overturned lawn chairs. Her legs, carefully folded behind her head, suggest either deep REM sleep or a powerful evolutionary response to late-night decisions. Beside her lies the second, stretched fully across the terrain, a position signaling total trust in the environment. The world may pass, pigeons may judge, but here they remain. On today's episode of Streetwalker Geographic, here, nestled upon a tattered sofa, the subject lies motionless. Note the posture, limbs akimbo, mouth slightly open, the universal signal of a being that has finally outrun its own thoughts. But then, the creature erupts into consciousness, eyes wide with the primal terror of one who has forgotten where they are. On today's episode of Streetwalker Geographic, here we observe a rare zombie tweaker, perfectly balanced, leaning back on nothing, surviving entirely on vibes, adrenaline, and poor decisions.